Welcome to this special video edition of Signalcast, the podcast from Signal Group. Signal is a bipartisan communication and advocacy firm located in Washington, D.C. I'm your host, Andrew Deerin, Creative Director at Signal. So seemingly overnight, COVID-19 has transformed almost every industry, and business as usual doesn't even come close to resembling what it did just 2 short months ago. And the business of making movies is one sector that has been hit especially hard. Across the world, movie theaters have been closed, film festivals have been canceled or postponed, and film releases have been moved to future dates or delayed indefinitely. Global box office numbers have dropped by billions of dollars, and streaming, which was already on the rise, has become even more popular. Joining me today via Zoom is feature film editor Wyatt Smith. Wyatt's film credits include Harriet, Doctor Strange, Mary Poppins Returns, Pirates of the Caribbean, On Stranger Tides, just to name a few. And currently, he is working on the Walt Disney Picture live-action remake of the 1989 smash, The Little Mermaid. And full disclosure, Wyatt and I spent many long nights back in the early 2000s toiling away on sizzle reels and music videos at Sony Studios on West 54th Street in New York City, which, of course, now is unfortunately an apartment building. Welcome, Wyatt.
Thanks, Andrew. Good to see you.
Good to see you. So I guess right out the gate, is this the end of the summer blockbuster?
I seriously hope not. And I don't imagine it is. I mean, one of the key things in your introduction is just, this has only been a few months and the impact has been tremendous, but it's also only been a few months. It's completely changed what our daily lifestyles are and how we communicate and how we take in media and entertainment. So I can understand where it's such a radical change that we think it's going to be permanent or forever. There are things that are going to change forever, but I think it's hard to believe that the life we're living these last 2 months is the life we're going to be living for the next 50 years. I don't believe that to be the case. There are some movies that are going to start to show in July, and it's going to be interesting to see how blockbustery they end up being, because I think there's going to be a lot of fear, and there's certainly going to be I don't know how theaters are set up. I mean, thankfully, AMC seems to be making a big effort to try to keep all their theaters open globally starting in July. But I don't think we're going to see quite the numbers or anything that we're used to for a while to come. But I don't think that's gone. I think we're just making an adjustment.
So what do you think the future of going to the movies is going to look like? I mean, obviously there's like you said, there is some fear, but we're also heading out in droves to the beaches and to protest marches, and people are starting to sort of try to return to life as normal. So what do you think going to the movies is going to look like when theaters do actually open up?
Well, I think when they do open up, obviously, initially, there's going to be a lot of extra caution. Of course, I hope everybody's wearing masks. It's not hard to wear a mask for a 2-hour movie. Popcorn and soda makes it a little more interesting, and I hope they're disinfecting theaters. I mean, seating people in every other seat would be a nice idea, but they're not even doing that on flights, so I can't imagine they're going to do that in the movie theaters. I was on a packed plane 3 weeks ago flying from Texas to Tennessee. We couldn't have been more smashed in, and way less space than you'd have in a movie theater, but thankfully, even after my quarantine, I seem to be okay. So the more we learn about living with the virus, I think the more we'll understand what our risks and how to maintain our personal spaces. The important thing is obviously the people who are there all the time working at the movie theaters are taking the most precautions because they're going to have the most exposure.
So I certainly can understand, and I think the general public can wrap their heads around how movie production is going to be affected by the coronavirus. And you got a lot of people on set, especially for larger movies, 100, 150, 250 people
or more.
But the post side of things is different. So how has COVID-19 affected your business of editing? I mean, you're in quarters, collaborating. How is that?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is, like, if you take an example like The Little Mermaid, we were in pre-production. We were 1 week away from starting filming after 9 months of pre-production. So the interesting thing is, for me as an editor, I'm not quite as sequestered away like I normally would be. I was quite involved in, pre-visualization and planning. A film like that is incredibly complicated to achieve visually. So I am going to have to abide by all those set interactions that they implement, which will be temperature checks and testing and isolating and disinfecting and masks and gloves and shifting schedules and all those things that I think are going to be pretty, they'll be strange, but we'll be able to It'll get weirder, though. It's the concept of what people do when they go home at night to maintain that caution, because, we obviously, you can see when somebody gets a flu of any kind on a set, how quickly it can spread. For my world in post, once we're just editing the film, not going to be so bad. I mean, I'm used to sitting with the director all day, and I'm assuming that that's going to continue to be the case. We don't really have visitors. It's a very isolating process. My team, they all have their individual machines. We're not really sharing equipment. I do believe it would be smart to be, disinfecting maybe twice a day, whatever the guidelines are from the union, which thankfully they just submitted their guidelines, which we're all reviewing now, which says the same type of thing. It's just maintaining a clean workspace and just generally being careful. Communal meals might have to go away. That's a shame. And remote working is more of a possibility. The fact is, the technology's caught up in a way where, even though the feature films have massive amounts of data, there's ways for us to access and work remotely that are near seamless. Much the same way, even when we began the lockdown over in London, I continued working for a few more weeks. At that point, my director had gone off to home to New York. We were using programs like Evercast. He's logging into a web browser and basically watching a live stream of my edit while we have a little, video conference window open, and we just work business as usual. It's a little different in that, because it's a scheduled time, the work is even more focused than it normally is, and our work is pretty focused. I mean, it'll be interesting to see if it gets to a place where some of the lulls, or me just working on something on the side, even though somebody's tuned in, becomes more normal. Right now, it feels a little weird. It feels like you should always be presenting when you're in a video conference as opposed to just working. Right.
Yeah, I know when I'm working on edits, my primary editor is based in Orlando, and we use Skype. And, over the last 3 to 4 years, I would say, it's really gotten to the point where, I can see him going frame by frame without any delay. So that's certainly been helpful for smaller productions like the ones that I work on. And I can only imagine that if the world sort of does change dramatically, you would still be able to work closely with whoever you're directing and sort of not lose any of that collaborative nature.
Right, exactly. And of course, when you're dealing with things like animated projects or a lot of heavily visual effects projects, so much of the work is being done remotely anyway. On a big VFX summer blockbuster type film, I mean, the amount of times you spend in a review room with your VFX vendors all over the world, just sharing video clips and CineSyncs, and the fact is you're not really having a lot of real FaceTime anyway.
Right. So it seems like the industry was able to pivot pretty easily to this sort of new release directly to home. Do you think that was helpful?
It's definitely helpful because, look, anytime there's times of stress and trauma, and right now we have a lot of stress and trauma, but if you go back to the Depression, if you go back to the World Wars, the entertainment industry fares pretty well. It's escapism. People need to see things that pull them away from all the stress and pain of daily life when we're in these moments. So I think having these streaming platforms, being able to take films, and rather than everybody being like, oh, I was looking forward to that, now it's gone and I have to stare at the wall all day, it's, oh wait, I can watch this at home. There's something that can give that few hours of escape and entertainment or education. And I think I think streaming has been a wonderful thing. Obviously, Disney rolled out Disney Plus, and I think they made 2 years worth of subscribership in a matter of months. I mean, they blew through all their projections while also losing more money they could fathom by not having the parks.
Right.
Streaming is just another way to watch something. It doesn't determine if a movie's good or bad. Unfortunately, it does allow people to second screen a bit more, and not fully focus on what they're watching, which is a bit of a shame. That's one of the things I love about the movie theater.
Well, so to that point, do you think that directors and producers are going to start changing how they shoot things, knowing that it's going to probably end up on a phone or on a television, even if it's a 60-inch TV?
I don't think so. I mean, obviously there were very specific things like Quibi, we'll see how that does. But, because it was designed specifically for a phone to work in either orientation, you really had to shoot specifically for it, and everything's down to 10-minute sections of a piece. Otherwise, if you look, forget about streaming as just a delivery format. If you think of just the concept of small screen, big screen, those two worlds have blurred more in the last 20 years than anybody would have ever imagined. Once HD TV came in, once we had a wider aspect, so already we were starting to have a more cinematic feel to what our shows look like. The fact is, the cameras you would use on a TV production, on a high-end TV production, if you look at a Game of Thrones or anything like that, they're no different than what's being used in the feature. The visual effects houses are the same. The budgets are different, the finances are different, the schedules are different, but the quality of what that material is, I look at the cinematography on recent shows like Devs on FX or Tales from the Loop on Amazon. You look at the quality of how these shows are made and the sound design and the music and everything. It's all the feature side. The feature side and the television side is kind of merged already. So I don't think one requires a stylistic change. I think the quality of all of it has just come up to meet.
So that sort of was going to lead sort of into my next question about, does it change your approach to an edit? I mean, are you going to be focusing more on tighter shots that show emotion, or are more cuts required to keep an audience's attention? Are you more focused on bigger picture master shots, or single 1 and 2 shots, more?
Again, if this was before 2000, absolutely, I would make every one of those changes. That was always the issue with the smaller screen. You put on a big wide shot, it doesn't look like anything. The fact is most people have at least a 40-inch TV in their house in a widescreen format, in HD or UHD 2K. Now we're getting up to 4K. I mean, Netflix requiring all shows to deliver in 6K. They're future-proofing what this is all going to look like at home. Theaters only don't even go to that higher resolution. So the fact is I don't believe I'm going to make any of those changes based on it, because the thing is home viewing environments are pretty spectacular. But the fact is any feature film, it's guided by 3 forms. It's story first, performance second, to fun, and then pace. So it's basically, does it make sense? Find the best performances to tell that story, and then move people through it in a way that delivers the most emotional impact, while also not taking too much of their lives, because you overstay your welcome. In terms of how you cut styles of shots, that's not really quite the concern, because all of those things, if you're doing something for a format or a style, then you're doing that over substance, and you're probably not making as good a movie. And again, I think the technology of how we view things is matching the creativity. So we don't have to limit or restrict or handcuff ourselves in those ways.
That's great. So what films were you looking for that got delayed by COVID-19? Was there anything that was come out?
Of course, tons, absolutely tons. I mean, the first and foremost would probably be Mulan. Definitely bummed that had to wait for how long it was taking. I mean, the interesting thing to see is Tenet, which hasn't, the new Christopher Nolan film, which has not really delayed. So that's meant to come out, I think, July 17th. Black Widow, always love a Marvel film. The new Bond film, is looking forward to that. That's pushed to the fall. Whole lot of sequels. There was the new Top Gun, the new Quiet Place. There's tons of movies looking forward to, but the fact is they'll just come out when they come out.
Right. So speaking of when they come out, as somebody that's makes their living making movies, what is your sort of home setup? I mean, are you just a pretty standard TV kind of guy? Do you have special audio setups? I mean, take me through. And what would you have changed now that you've spent so much time watching, as we all have, watching movies at home?
Well, as from when we first met, I live in New York. I'm in a Brooklyn apartment. It's not very big. It's not well set up I don't have a den or, my own little screening room. So I do have a 55-inch TV, which is pretty big for me. It's an OLED Sony. I really love the OLEDs, even though Sony's now not going to make them anymore, of course, which is annoying. But sound-wise, I just have good stereo at home. I wish I had surround, but unfortunately, I live on the thoroughfare of the Brooklyn Bridge. There is basically a cacophony of trucks and sirens and everything all the time. So it doesn't matter how good my audio setup is, I'm still going to have a hard time. So someday down the road, I hope to have like a really nice setup. I encourage surround. I think it's great. The fact that TV is now mixed and surround in the same stages that we mix feature films into that same quality is incredible. And I wish I could grab onto that, but right now I can't.
So in my final question, in the sure to be made COVID-19 feature film, who do you cast as Dr. Fauci? Besides Brad Pitt, of course.
That's tough. Well, that's the thing, because the Brad Pitt clouds that. I think that it'll probably be directed by Oliver Stone, if I can contribute to that. And if it's a musical, I think Josh Gad should play COVID. But Fauci, I think Brad Pitt did a good job. He could reprise that.
I love that. That's great. All right, well, that'll do it for today's show. Thank you so much to my friend Wyatt Smith for taking the time to chat with us about the future of movies in a post-COVID-19 world. It really was great to get an insider's perspective. Be sure to check out this episode and all of our other Signalcast episodes on our website at signaldc.com/news. For our entire production staff, I'm Andrew Deerin, and we will see you next time.